Hello everyone, Nukin here, and welcome back again to my channel. In this video, I'll be showing you how to solo Phase 3 of the Heroic Tank Raid with your new toy, Commander Luke Skywalker. So I'll be showing you how to set up the run here in just a moment. I'll also be showing you how to mod this team, the abilities that you need to upgrade to make it work, and lastly I'll review the strategy of how this team works. So before we get started, please give this video a thumbs up if you like it, if you learned something. Subscribe to my channel so you can see more future content, and let's get started. Hope you enjoy the video. So let's get started talking about how you would set up this team initially for this run. First off, you start off with Commander Luke Skywalker, also referred to as CLS, and you reduce the turn meter and apply the tenacity down debuff on the raid boss. Then you want to use Tarkin's intimidation tactics and his ultimate firepower special back to back, and you're basically just buying yourself time for Thrawn to get his fracture off. Make sure that you get a taunt off with Shore Trooper before the tank in the back fires. If the tank fires and you don't have a buff on any of your units, they will get one shot, and that will ruin your chance of soloing the phase. You really don't need to focus on doing much with the side droids. The side droids have offense down, so when they are attacking, they're not doing very much damage. Emperor Palpatine ends up stunning them quite often, and if you're going to do any basic attacks on the side droids, make sure that you're using Emperor Palpatine and Tarkin to do so, because their basics do not reduce turn meter, but Commander Luke Skywalker's does. So the combination of AoE attacks, also known as area of effective attacks, are going to end up weakening or killing the side droids, and you won't really need to do too many basics. Once all the side droids are destroyed, it really becomes much more simple. All you need to do is focus on the turn meter of the tank in the back and getting a taunt off with Shore Trooper and making sure that the raid boss doesn't end up taking a turn. So once we kill these last two side droids, you've basically set up the run initially, and then we can go more into the strategy from there. So let's talk about the strategy of this team. So before we talk about the updated version, we should talk about the older version of the IGM team, which stands for the Imperial Grand Maneuver, which was first introduced by my guildmate McMull2 and his two friends who helped theorycraft it with him, Josh and Tal. So we had the Thrawn lead with Shore Trooper and Tarkin, but instead of Commander Luke and Emperor Palpatine, there was a Jyn Erso and a Director Krennic. Now we have to understand why those two characters were used. Now Jyn Erso was used to basically control the turn meter of the B2 to assist in that. That was her main purpose. And the main purpose of Director Krennic was he was just another Empire character that had two specials. The more specials the better, because every time you use a special with the fracture debuff on, then you're going to reduce the turn meter, and on top of that he had tenacity down, which helps in the reduction of turn meter to make it more consistent. Now with the updated version here, we have Palpatine, which brings a brand new buff to the team, offense up, which is very good. He also has two specials, so he's similar to Director Krennic in that way. And Commander Luke is good. He reduces 100% turn meter just like Jyn Erso does, but he does much more damage, and he brings the tenacity down to the table. So that's why this team is actually an updated version, and it's better. You actually can probably do this in about half the time originally, and it's much more consistent. If you look at the enrage timer, it's still at 15, and I think towards the end of the run, the B2 only ended up taking 2 turns, when in the past it would take you twice as long, and you would be basically almost at the enrage. So this updated version is much more stronger, and we can now start focusing on the details of how you would run this team throughout the phase. Now let's get into the details, starting off with Shore Trooper. So when the tank in the back is about to fire, you need to get a taunt off. It's safe to taunt with Shore Trooper when the tank in the back's turn meter is around 50% or more. If you end up taking another turn with Shore Trooper, that's okay because his taunt actually lasts for 2 turns. Just make sure not to use the maneuver while his taunt is up, because he will take another turn before the tank in the back fires, and then your team will be exposed and someone will likely die. So that's how you would want to run Shore Trooper. Also, it's nice to use Empire specials while his taunt is up because they get extra turn meter when that occurs, but you're not always going to end up having that timed perfectly. Now, moving on from Shore Trooper details to Palpatine. Palpatine is really simple. If he has an ability to use and it's not off cooldown, then just use it. So let the hate flow, power the dark side, maneuver. It doesn't really matter. If you can use an Empire special with Palpatine, even if Shore Trooper is not taunted, you should use it right away. Moving on from Palpatine to Tarkin, it's a little bit different. I'm actually saving his ultimate firepower until the B2's turn meter is nearly full. So, for example, I'm using intimidation tactics, I'm using his maneuver, but only when the B2's turn meter is over 50% like so, will I ever use the ultimate firepower. So it's kind of like my backup plan when the turn meter is getting too high. So that's how you use the other 2 Empire characters, Tarkin and Palpatine. And last but not least, let's get into the details of one of the MVPs of the team, Commander Luke, aka CLS. Some tips in executing with him are to try to maintain his call to action buff. The call to action buff increases his crit chance and his crit damage substantially, which is part of the reason why you can clear the phase much quicker. His damage output is pretty ridiculous when you compare him to his rebel counterpart Jyn Erso, and whenever it's his turn, I do a basic attack with him, which reduces the turn meter of the raid boss by about 30%, and if the turn meter of the B2 boss is 50% or greater, I will use his first special, Use the Force, which will reset the turn meter back down to 0, and the only time that you ever use his second special is if your Use the Force is on cooldown and you want to quickly be able to have it ready to use, like so right here. So let's talk about the mods that you would want to run with this team, starting off with our leader, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So he has a base speed of 150, and that's exactly what you want to run him as. So you want to remove all of these mods, and this may sound strange, but you can run him without any mods in this battle. If you're concerned, you can still give him 6 mods. Just make sure that none of those mods have any sort of speed on them in the secondary position and no speed arrow. You want to run him at 150 base speed. Going on to the next hero, we have Tarkin. You want to run a speed set, and that's going to be the case for just about all of these heroes. Preferably, you just want them running really quick. The offense and defense primaries of the square and the diamonds are always going to be set in stone there. Health and protection on the circle doesn't really matter for this team, so don't really focus on that either, but you're going to want to run a speed arrow. Any sort of offensive stat in the triangle position for Tarkin, crit chance, offense, crit damage, and preferably a offense primary cross, but you're really just focusing on secondary speed for the most part. Commander Luke, also a speed set, and you're going to want to run a speed arrow, a crit damage triangle for sure, combined with his high crit chance and the call to action buff. He's going to be critting nearly all the time, so crit damage triangle and a potency primary cross. These 2 primary stats are best in the slot, and there's really no comparison whatsoever for those 2 mod positions. For Palpatine, I was running a offense set with a 2-piece crit chance set. I would preferably run a speed set, just didn't have those mods on me. Looking for basically any mods that have secondary speed, so I had 3 there, 8 there, speed arrow, a offensive triangle, so offense, crit chance, crit damage, something like that, and a offense cross. You're not using him to land debuffs, you're just using him to do damage and to go often to use his specials. And lastly, we have Shore Trooper. Out of all the characters, he is going to be running a health circle, but you can still get by with the protection circle, but he is the only character that you would probably want to focus on giving a health circle to this member on your team. And for the arrow, you're going to want to run a speed arrow, something defensive in the triangle slot. I would assume health would be the most important stat, but protection works. You're looking for secondaries that increase his health and defense. And lastly, in the cross, we have a health primary mod here in the cross, which is actually best in slot. You're really looking for health because he heals based off his max health. So now let's talk about the abilities that you're going to want to Omega and Zeta, starting off with our leader, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So you're not going to need to Omega any of his abilities. The only thing that you need to do for Thrawn is to Zeta his unique, Ebb and Flow. This team will not work unless this ability is Zetaed. The Zeta allows him to reduce the turn meter of the raid boss in phase 3 when he is fractured by 15% turn meter every time an Empire ally uses a special ability. Moving on to our next character, we have Tarkin. I would Omega Ultimate Firepower. This allows the turn meter reduction to be consistent 100% of the time. And I would look into Omegaing this ability, which reduces the cooldown of the special by 1, which definitely helps, but I don't think it is required. I would Omega this basic attack here. It would help, but I don't think it's required. And you don't need to Zeta his unique, but it would help as well. Going on to the next character, we have Commander Luke. He's probably the most Omega heavy out of all the characters. You need to Omega his basic attack, which will allow him to reduce turn meter on his basic. You're going to need to Omega his first special, which allows him to reduce 100% turn meter on the B2, which is very important. And you're not going to need to Omega Call to Action, but it will help if you're concerned about him dying and maybe your Commander Luke isn't geared up all the way. You don't need to Zeta any of his uniques for this team. Moving on to Emperor Palpatine, you're probably going to want to Omega his first special, which reduces the cooldown of Power of the Dark Side by 1, which allows him to use it more often. You want to use a lot of Empire specials to reduce turn meter, and you don't need to upgrade anything else for Emperor Palpatine. And then lastly, for Shore Trooper, you're going to want to Omega Regroup, which reduces the cooldown of this ability by 1. You're going to be using Regroup a lot to protect your team from the tank in the back. And if you have an extra Omega lying around, you can throw it on Stand Guard Unique, which increases the turn meter gain that Empire allies get when they use a special ability. It will help, but I don't think it's required to solo the phase. And those are the Omegas and Zetas. So I'm going to start wrapping up here. Let's quickly review what we discussed. We went over the updated Imperial Grand Maneuver Team, IGM 2.0 for short. We talked about how to set up the run, the abilities that you want to upgrade, the mods that you want to use, and how to execute the strategy of this team. To save time, I've skipped to the end of this run. The full run took about 60 minutes to complete, but I imagine I could probably knock that down to around 40 to 50 minutes. Overall, this IGM 2.0 team is pretty fun to play. It's a much more enjoyable experience compared to how it was in the past, and I think it's cool that we're finally at the point where we have the capability to solo multiple phases in the tank raid. This will allow us to not divert our attention so we can focus on the new upcoming game mode, Territory Battles. So if you have any questions after watching this video, make sure to just leave a comment down below and I will try to get to you as soon as I can. And if you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps a lot. Hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends. Until next time, cheers guys.